there's been this theme developing, not intentionally, throughout these fellowships around the idea of God's love. Is it conditional? Is it not conditional? What does it mean? So by now in this fellowship, we've delved into the subject of Hashem's names. So I'm not going to restate all of it each time, but you know how each name reveals a different secret into Hashem's revelation of His light in the world. Because if it's true that there's nothing but godliness in the world, that Einon Milado, that God is all that there is, then how is it that there's this very, very convincing and persuasive perception or illusion of multiplicity, of everything being separate and different, when in reality there is God's oneness behind all of it? And so, for example, the name Elohim is a revelation of God through the laws of nature, which also represents the idea of divine justice, because there is divine justice on one dimension, but a higher, more transcendent dimension is a higher, more transcendent name, which is the tetragrammaton, which is Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey, which is the four-letter name that is the highest dimension that people try to pronounce it, but really you're not supposed to try to pronounce it, because we can't pronounce it, because we can't understand it. We can't understand complete transcendence over time, and so we're not able to even pronounce it. We look at it and we internalize it and we think about it, but we can't pronounce it, although there are those that do. So this name conveys God's loving kindness. It conveys His compassion, which is at the very essence of Hashem. So is there divine justice? Yes, there is divine justice. And that is a very real and true dimension. But when you go deeper past that dimension, behind that justice, is just love and compassion for everybody and for everything. That is God's very essence. Now, we've spoken about this before, but the Torah portion conveys a deep insight, not only into Hashem's love for us, but into how we're ideally supposed to manifest that love for each other. So this is the portion of the Torah portion that I always pull out. I can't help but doing it, because it always speaks to me so powerfully. And Moses took the rod from before the Lord as he commanded him, and Moses and Aaron gathered the congregation together before the rock. And he said to them, Hear now, you rebels, must we fetch you out water from this rock? And Moses lifted up his hand, and with his rod he struck the rock twice, and the water came out abundantly, and the congregation drank, and their beasts also. And the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, because you did not believe in me to sanctify me in the eyes of the people of Israel, therefore you shall not bring this congregation into the land which I have given them. This is the water of Merivah, because the people of Israel strove with the Lord, and He was sanctified in them. Now, there's a lot of discussion regarding what exactly the big mistake was here. But to me, the reason given that has always spoken the most powerfully, at least to me in my heart, was the idea that Moses' sin here was that he called the nation rebels. Right? He didn't say they were being rebellious. He said that they were rebels. For one brief moment in his life, Moses slipped up regarding the nation that he loved so deeply. And for that moment, he conflated their current behavior with their very essence. And yes, considering their recent track record, from the golden calf to the episode of the spies to their constant complaints and rebellions, one could forgive him. It was an all too human mistake. But at Moses' level, it was a mistake of huge consequence. I mean, imagine that your 3-year-old gets his hands in the groceries, opens up the carton of eggs, and throws them across the room. As a matter of fact, yesterday morning, I didn't want Shiloh I take the kids out almost every morning into our chicken coop. They feed the chickens, they collect the eggs, and Shiloh is just 2 years old. And I said to the kids, don't pick up any of the eggs, because we have this one massive chicken called the Brahma. And the Brahma, when you get too close to the eggs, he can get aggressive, and Shiloh is about his size. So I didn't want the Brahma to attack Shiloh. So I said, don't go for the eggs. So Shiloh picked up the egg, and I said, Shiloh, I said not to take the egg. He says, oops. And he just dropped the eggs that fell and splattered. And so I could have said, the higher level me actually was present at the moment. And I said, Sheila, you're such a good boy, but that wasn't a good thing to do. You're supposed to listen to Abba. You usually listen to Abba. You're such a good boy, but remember, please listen to Abba. But instead, I could have screamed, the lower level me could have screamed, bad boy, you're a bad boy. Now, such a declaration from a parent, right, with such anger and conviction could have quite a negative effect on a young child's self-perception for their entire lives. And Moshe was not only the shepherd for the flock of Israel, but he was very much looked to as a father figure for the Jewish people, for this, infant nation wandering in the desert. We were born as a nation, literally, when we walked into the desert, when we left Egypt. So we were this infant nation, and they looked to Moses as their father. And by conflating their behavior with their essence at that very moment, Moshe may very well have taken the wind out of their sails and confirmed this lurking fear, right, their deepest insecurity, that Hashem indeed didn't love them anymore. And then Moshe didn't love them anymore. Now, there was a sage that was famous for his philosophy about the power of speech and empowerment, and his name was Rabbi Isaiah Horowitz, and he was known as the Shlah. And he believed in the power of speech and in the power of empowerment and in the power of expectations. And he had this novel, illuminating take on these verses from the book of Proverbs. This was shared by Rabbi Tzvi Weinreb. I don't know if I gave him credit for this. He says, the Shlah, this is the quote. It says, do not rebuke a scoffer, for he will hate you. Reprove a wise man, and he will love you. Instruct a wise man, and he will grow wiser. Teach a righteous man, and he will gain learning. Now, how does the Shlah read this? His insight is that these verses should be read, do not rebuke someone by calling them a scoffer. They're going to hate you for that. Reprove them instead by calling them a wise man, and he'll love you for that. Instruct each pupil by calling him a wise man, and he will be open and receptive to it. And when you call him a wise man, you need to truly see him as a wise man, and it will make him love you, and it will make your rebuke land, and it will allow your rebuke to be accepted. So then Rabbi Weinberg goes on to bring the teachings of Rabbi Yaakov Harlap, who explains that this is why Hashem expressed his disapproval of Moshe's actions with the fact that he hit the rock when he was commanded to speak to the rock. He explained that when Hashem commanded Moshe to speak to the rock, he was conveying the power of speech and the power of positive expectations. Whereas when Moshe hit the rock, it conveyed a pessimism, which lacked the belief in the higher, more transcendent power of growth and change on behalf of the Israelites. It showed that he sort of, at that moment, lacked the belief and the understanding that his words have such a creative power for the entire nation of Israel. It's like, they are who they are. That's what he was conveying when he struck the rock. And his harsh, punitive force was the only way he believed that he could get them in line, right? By striking the rock in that exact way that he did 40 years before, he was conveying that, that he believed that we are who we are, that people don't change, and that these Israelites haven't changed the slightest in all these years. And, I first learned this idea, I think it must have been 20 years ago, by Eli Moshe. Was that his name, Jeremy? Rabbi Eli Moshe? It was Eli Moshe. And it was one of those teachings that immediately penetrated to the very core of my being. And I don't always succeed in rising to the highest adherence of this truth. But living this principle is indeed one of my greatest aspirations, not only with my fellow man, but even more importantly, also with myself. Believing that I myself am my very essence and expression of Hashem's light in the world. It's not easy to believe that about yourself. You can see other people like that, but believing that about yourself, it's a hard thing. But when I believe that my essence, like all of our essences, is a spark from the beautiful light of Hashem himself, well, that is part of what we can do to bring out the light in all of mankind. This is a time when mankind needs the light within us to be brought out. And I bless us that one day we will soon be able to see Mashiach's arrival. And Mashiach will reveal that hidden divine light burning in the hearts of all of mankind. May we see that very soon. And may Hashem continue to reward those who act in truth and faithfulness to his name, and punish those who believe that they themselves are God and the truth is of no consequence. Amen, my friend. Shalom, shalom. Back to you, Jeremy.